At Suruburo 16 hours on June 6, 1944, Staff Sergeant Jim Walwork felt the Horsa glider slam into Earth at 145 kilometers per hour. The landing skid hit ground. The nose shattered. Both pilots crashed through the windscreen and landed in front of the glider. Walwork lay stunned for 3 seconds. Then he heard Lieutenant Den Brotheridge shouting orders from inside the fuselage. The doors burst open. 28 soldiers poured out. They were 47 meters from Pegasus Bridge. The German sentries had not heard them land. The precision was almost perfect. 6 gliders had taken off from Dorset 93 minutes earlier. 3 were designated for the bridge over the Caen Canal. 3 for the bridge over the River Orne 450 meters to the east. The canal bridge measured 45 meters long. The approach was a 200-meter field bordered by barbed wire, anti-personnel mine, and machine gun positions. Intelligence reports indicated 50 German troops garrisoned nearby. The defenses were designed to prevent infantry assault. They did not account for gliders landing in darkness without engine noise to announce their arrival. Walwork had flown the lead glider. Behind him, Sergeants Oliver Boland and Peter Boyle piloted gliders 2 and 3. Each carried 1 platoon from D Company, 2nd Battalion, Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire, light infantry. Each platoon had 28 men armed with rifles, Steen guns, grenades, and a 2-inch mortar. Each glider also carried Royal Engineers with demolition equipment to disable German charges planted on the bridge. The mission was simple: capture both bridges intact, hold them until relieved, prevent German reinforcements from using them to counterattack the invasion beaches 6 hours later. The story begins 14 months earlier, in April 1943, when Major General Richard Gale assumed command of the 6th Airborne Division. His mission was to protect the eastern flank of Operation Overlord, the Allied invasion of Normandy scheduled for June 1944. The invasion plan called for 5 beach landings. The easternmost beach, Sword, would land British forces near Ouistreham. Those forces needed an exit route east across the Orne River and Caen Canal to prevent German armor from attacking the beachhead. 2 bridges provided the only crossings for 15 kilometers. The Benneville Bridge crossed the Caen Canal. The Ranville Bridge crossed the Orne River 450 meters east. Both were steel bascule bridges that could be raised to allow ship traffic. Both were wired for demolition. If the Germans destroyed them before Allied forces captured them, the 6th Airborne Division would be trapped with its back to the sea. German panzers from the 21st Division could mass without crossing obstacles and overwhelm British positions. Gale's initial plan called for parachute assault. The 5th Parachute Brigade would drop near the bridges at H-6 hours. Before the beach landings began, the plan assumed paratroopers could assemble, advance to the bridges, and capture them before the Germans responded. Intelligence officers questioned this assumption. Night parachute drops scattered troops over wide areas. Assembly took hours. The Germans would hear the aircraft. They would have time to destroy the bridges or reinforce them sufficiently to repel the assault. Brigadier Hugh Kindersley, commanding 6th Air Landing Brigade, proposed an alternative: glider assault. Gliders made no engine noise. They could land troops directly onto objectives in concentrated groups. If the pilots were skilled enough to land within 50 meters of the bridges, the assault force could capture them in minutes, before German troops understood what was happening. The proposal required exceptional piloting. Landing a glider in daylight on a prepared field was difficult. Landing at night on a 200-meter field bordered by obstacles in enemy territory exceeded any training the glider pilot regiment had conducted. Kindersley believed it was possible. He needed the best company in the division to prove it. Major John Howard commanded D Company, 2nd Battalion Ox and Bucks. He was 30 years old. He had joined the Army as a private in 1932, risen to sergeant by 1938, received a commission in 1940, and commanded D Company since 1942. His men considered him demanding but fair. He trained constantly and expected the same from them. When Kindersley asked Brigadier Nigel Poet, commanding 5th Parachute Brigade, to nominate a company for the mission, Poet recommended Howard without hesitation. On April 2, 1943, Howard received confidential orders. Report to division headquarters. Bring your company to full strength. Prepare for intensive training. No details about the mission would be provided until later. Howard selected his men carefully. He needed volunteers willing to undergo training more difficult than standard airborne qualification. He needed men who could function independently if separated from their units. He needed physical fitness. mental resilience, and absolute reliability under stress. 181 men were selected. D Company's 3 rifle platoons plus 2 additional platoons from B Company provided infantry. 20 Royal Engineers would handle demolitions. 12 glider pilots from C Squadron, Glider Pilot Regiment, would fly the missions. Unlike most air crews, glider pilots were trained as infantry. After landing, they were expected to fight alongside the troops they delivered. Training began in May 1943. Physical conditioning consisted of cross-country marches carrying 40-kilogram packs. Forced marches of 40 kilometers became routine. Navigation exercises occurred at night without lights. Weapons training emphasized rapid target acquisition and fire discipline. The men learned to operate in small groups without officers present. They learned to make tactical decisions independently based on incomplete information. The glider pilots trained separately at first. Their assignment was arguably more difficult than the infantry's. They would fly airspeed Horsa gliders across the English Channel at night, navigate by stopwatch and map to a landing zone they had never seen, release from the tow aircraft at 1,800 meters altitude, and land on a field 200 meters long, bordered by obstacles. Margin for error was 0. Undershooting meant landing in the canal. Overshooting meant crashing into the village beyond. Landing left or right of the center line meant hitting barbed wire or mines. The Horsa was a high-wing wooden glider manufactured by Airspeed Limited and various subcontractors, including furniture companies. Wingspan was 26.8 meters. Length was 20.4 meters. Empty weight was 3,796 kilograms. Maximum loaded weight was 7,030 kilograms. The fuselage was plywood over a wooden frame. The wings were fabric-covered wood. The glider could carry 28 fully equipped soldiers plus crew, or alternatively 1 jeep and trailer or 1 6-pounder anti-tank gun. The Horsa had large barn door flaps that could be deployed to create extreme drag. This allowed steep descent angles that brought the glider down quickly once the landing zone was identified. The landing gear consisted of a tricycle configuration for takeoff, but could be jettisoned in flight. Operational landings occurred on a central skid and the nose wheel. The skid absorbed impact through a sprung mechanism. Hard landings shattered the nose but left the fuselage intact enough for troops to exit. Staff Sergeant Walwork was 24 years old. He had joined the Glider Pilot Regiment in 1942 after volunteering from the infantry. His training included 200 hours of glider flight time, mostly in daylight. Night flying training consisted of 54 sorties over 9 months. Some were conducted with goggles tinted to simulate darkness. Others were actual night flights using only moonlight for reference. The final phase involved landing on progressively smaller fields until the pilots could consistently touch down within a 50-meter circle. Howard received details of the mission on May 2, 1944. He was shown aerial photographs of the bridges. He was shown a scale model of the terrain. He was briefed on German troop dispositions. 50 men from the 716th Infantry Regiment garrisoned Bénouville. They rotated guards on the bridges but maintained minimal alert status because the front was over 200 kilometers away. They had removed the bridge demolition charges the previous month for maintenance and had not yet reinstalled them. This was extraordinary luck. If the charges had been in place, capturing the bridges intact would have been impossible. Training intensified in May. 2 bridges in England were identified that matched the dimensions of the Bénouville and Ranville bridges. Howard took his company there and practiced assault procedures 43 times. Each platoon knew its exact role. Number 1 platoon under Lieutenant Brotheridge would assault the canal bridge from the west. Number 2 platoon under Lieutenant Wood would secure the canal bridge from the east and establish defensive positions. Number 3 platoon under Lieutenant Smith would provide fire support for the Orne Bridge. Number 4 platoon under Lieutenant Fox would assault from the west. Number 5 platoon under Lieutenant Sweeney would secure from the east. Number 6 platoon was held in reserve. The Royal Engineers would disable demolition mechanisms if they found any. The glider pilots would fight as infantry after landing. Total assault time from glider landing to bridge secured was estimated at 10 minutes. The rehearsals were conducted at night. The gliders would land in darkness at 1-minute intervals. Each platoon would exit and advance immediately without waiting for other platoons. Fire discipline was critical. In darkness, with multiple friendly units advancing simultaneously, identifying targets required constant awareness. The training emphasized speed and aggression. The Germans would be confused. The first minutes would be chaotic. The side that imposed its will fastest would control the bridges. On May 30th, D Company moved to RAF Tarrant Rushton in Dorset. The airfield was secured. No one could enter or leave. Howard briefed his men on June 4th using the scale model and photographs. He distributed maps showing each platoon's route. He issued code words. Ham meant the canal bridge was captured intact. Jam meant the Orne Bridge was captured intact. Jack meant the canal bridge was captured but destroyed. Lard meant the Orne Bridge was captured but destroyed. The gliders were loaded on June 5th. Each soldier carried his personal weapon, 100 rounds of ammunition, 4 30-round Bren gun magazines, and up to 9 grenades. Some carried Piat anti-tank weapons and gammon bombs. Each platoon had a radio and 2-inch mortar. Water and rations were minimal because the mission was expected to last less than 12 hours before relief arrived from the beaches. The gliders departed at 2256 hours on June 5th. 6 Handley-Page Halifax bombers towed them. The formation climbed to 1,800 meters and turned south toward the channel. Flight time would be 67 minutes. The gliders flew in trail formation, each separated by approximately 1 minute. This ensured they would land at intervals, allowing the previous platoon to clear the landing zone. Crossing the channel, the formation encountered cloud at 1,000 meters. The gliders flew through it blind, relying on their tow aircraft to maintain course. Turbulence was moderate. Private Willie Gray, sitting in one of the forward gliders, needed to urinate badly but had no option except to wait. Other soldiers sang to pass time and calm nerves. Major Howard, who normally suffered air sickness during training flights, felt fine. He later attributed this to adrenaline. At 0:07 hours on June 6th, the formation crossed the French coast near Cabourg. The tow aircraft climbed to 2,100 meters to clear German anti-aircraft gun range. At this altitude, Staff Sergeant Walwork could see the Orne River reflecting moonlight. He could see the canal. He called course corrections to his tow pilot. At 0:09 hours, the tow pilot announced 3 minutes to release. Walwork prepared for release. He checked that the landing gear jettison mechanism was ready. He confirmed the flap controls were functioning. He reviewed the landmarks visible in moonlight. The canal was visible. The bridge should be visible closer. The field was not visible yet but would appear once they descended. At 0:02 hours, Walwork released from tow at precisely 1,800 meters altitude. The glider was silent except for wind noise. He had approximately 4 minutes of flight time. He needed to lose 1,800 meters of altitude and travel 5 kilometers horizontally to reach the landing zone. The glide ratio was achievable but required precise navigation. Any error in heading would put them in the canal or the village. At 0014 hours, Walwork saw the bridge. The distinctive T-shape of the bascule mechanism was visible against water reflecting moonlight. He turned toward it and deployed partial flaps. The glider descended steeply. He could see the field now. It was smaller than photographs suggested. The barbed wire was visible on the north perimeter. He aimed for the wire. At 0015 hours and 30 seconds, Walwork deployed full flaps. The glider descended almost vertically. The airspeed was 145 kilometers per hour. Too fast, but reducing speed would cause the glider to land short. He held course and prepared for impact. The glider hit at 0016 hours. The landing skid struck Earth. The glider bounced. It came down again and skidded forward. The nose shattered. Both pilots crashed through the broken windscreen. The glider stopped 47 meters from the bridge with its nose against the barbed wire exactly as Howard had requested during training. Walwork lay on the ground momentarily stunned. His co-pilot Staff Sergeant John Ainsworth was unconscious beside him. Inside the glider, Brotheridge was already shouting orders. The doors opened. 28 men exited in under 30 seconds. They formed into assault formation and advanced toward the bridge at a run. 2 German sentries stood at the west end of the bridge. They had heard nothing. The glider had made minimal noise on landing, and they were not expecting an attack. One sentry saw the soldiers advancing. He fired a flare pistol. The flare went up. Brotheridge threw a grenade at the machine gun position on the bridge. The grenade detonated. The machine gun went silent. German troops in a bunker on the east side opened fire. Brotheridge was hit in the neck and fell. He died minutes later. He was the first Allied soldier killed in action on D-Day. His men continued advancing. Private William Gray suppressed the bunker with his Bren gun. Corporal Bailey threw grenades through the firing slits. The bunker went silent. By 0018 hours, Number 1, platoon controlled the west end of the bridge. Lieutenant Wood's No. 2 platoon had landed and secured the east end. Lieutenant Smith's No. 3 platoon established defensive positions. German troops in Benouville were waking to explosions and gunfire but had not yet organized a response. The canal bridge was captured intact. At the Orne Bridge, 450 meters east, similar action unfolded. Gliders 4 and 5 landed successfully. Glider 6 landed 11 kilometers away at the wrong bridge and played no part in the operation. Lieutenant Fox's No. 4 platoon assaulted the Orne Bridge from the west. German machine guns opened fire. Fox's men silenced them with mortar fire. Lieutenant Sweeney's No. 5 platoon secured the east bank. By 0020 hours, both bridges were captured. Royal Engineers inspected the demolition mechanisms and found the charges removed. The bridges were secured. Howard transmitted the code words, ham and jam, both objectives taken intact. German response began at 0030 hours. A patrol from the 716th Regiment approached the canal bridge from Benouville. They were engaged at 50 meters by No. 2 platoon. The patrol withdrew after taking casualties. A second patrol approached from the east at 0045 hours. This group included soldiers and a British paratrooper who had been captured earlier. The patrol was challenged in English. They responded in German. The defenders opened fire and killed the entire patrol, including the British prisoner. At 0050 hours, reinforcements arrived. The 7th Parachute Battalion, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Richard Pine Coffin, had dropped at the designated zone and marched to the bridges. They brought heavy weapons, including Vickers machine guns and 3-inch mortars. Pine Coffin established a defensive perimeter around both bridges. Total strength was now approximately 600. German counterattacks would require significant force to dislodge them. Throughout the morning of June 6th, German forces probed the perimeter. Company strength attacks were repulsed by mortar and machine gun fire. The defenders heard tank engines at 0500 hours. A Panzer IV approached the canal bridge from the south. A Piat team waited until the tank reached 50 meters, then fired. The shot penetrated the front armor. The tank burned. The crew escaped, but the tank blocked the approach road. At 1300 hours, Lord Lovat's 1st Special Service Brigade arrived from Sword Beach. Lovett had marched 6.5 kilometers from the landing zone, accompanied by his personal piper playing Highland Laddie. Howard met him at the bridge. According to Howard, Lovett said, "We're awfully pleased to see you, old boy." According to Lovat, he said, "Well done. We're right on time." Both accounts may be embellished, but the relief was genuine. D Company had held the bridges for 13 hours. They had sustained 2 killed and 14 wounded. They had accomplished their mission. The strategic impact was exactly as planned. The bridges provided the only route for British forces advancing from Sword Beach to reinforce the airborne bridgehead. Throughout June 6th and subsequent days, thousands of troops and hundreds of vehicles crossed the bridges. The Germans attempted to destroy them with air attacks on June 9th. 13 aircraft struck the bridges. Anti-aircraft guns defending the position shot down several attackers. The bridges survived intact. The bridges remained in British hands throughout the Normandy campaign. They were never seriously threatened because the initial capture prevented German forces from establishing positions nearby. The 6th Airborne Division used the bridges as anchor points for the eastern flank of the entire invasion. Without them, the division would have been trapped against the sea and the invasion might have failed. The tactical assessment concluded that the operation succeeded because of 3 factors: precise navigation by the glider pilots, intensive training that allowed troops to execute complex maneuvers in darkness, and luck that the German demolition charges had been removed for maintenance. Any of these factors failing would have compromised the mission. All 3 working together created success. The navigation was extraordinary. Wallwork landed 47 meters from the target. The second glider landed 91 meters away. The third landed 137 meters away. Average distance from target was 91 meters. This level of precision at night using only map and stopwatch navigation was unprecedented. The pilots had trained for 9 months specifically for this mission. The training proved adequate barely. The intensive training allowed troops to function in chaos. When the gliders landed, soldiers knew exactly what to do. They did not wait for orders. They did not hesitate. They exited and advanced immediately. Fire discipline prevented friendly casualties despite multiple platoons operating in darkness. The 43 rehearsals had created muscle memory. The soldiers executed instinctively. The luck was the removed demolition charges. Had the charges been in place, capturing the bridges intact would have required preventing Germans from triggering them. This would have added complexity that might have exceeded the assault force's capability. The intelligence that identified the charges as removed for maintenance was accurate but unconfirmed until the bridges were inspected. Howard did not know whether charges were present until his engineers checked. They were not. This was fortune. The human cost was minimal compared to the strategic gain. 2 killed, 14 wounded. Lieutenant Brotheridge died on the bridge he captured. Lance Corporal Fred Greenhaw drowned when his glider broke in half on landing, and he fell into a pond weighed down by equipment. These were the only fatalities from D Company during the assault. Subsequent fighting over the following days added casualties, but the initial operation was remarkably successful, given the risks. The German garrison at the bridges numbered 50 men. They were engineers assigned to maintain the bridges, not combat infantry. They were not on full alert because no attack was expected. When gliders appeared without warning and troops began attacking, they responded as trained but were overwhelmed quickly. Most withdrew to Bénouville. Some were killed during the initial assault. Total German casualties at the bridges were approximately 12 killed and 20 captured. The operation became legendary immediately. Correspondence filing reports from Normandy described the glider assault as one of the most daring operations of D-Day. The precision landing received particular emphasis. 47 meters from the target at night was considered nearly impossible. That it succeeded validated the concept of glider assault for future operations. The bridges were renamed after the war. The Canal Bridge became Pegasus Bridge, named after the emblem of British airborne forces showing the winged horse Pegasus. The Orne Bridge became Horsa Bridge after the gliders used in the assault. Both names commemorate the operation and honor those who fought there. The original Pegasus Bridge was replaced in 1994 by a modern bridge with higher clearance for river traffic. The original bridge was preserved and moved to a museum at Ranville near the site. Visitors can see the bridge and walk across it. 3 concrete plinths mark the landing positions of the 3 gliders that assaulted the Canal Bridge. The museum displays artifacts from the operation, including weapons, equipment, and personal items from soldiers who fought there. The Café Gondry stands at the west end of Pegasus Bridge. Georges and Thérèse Gondry owned the café in 1944. They witnessed the assault and provided assistance to wounded soldiers. Their café was reportedly the first building in France liberated on D-Day. Though this claim is disputed, some historians argue that a house owned by Louis Picot was liberated first. The dispute is minor. Both buildings were liberated within minutes on June 6th. The Gondry family maintained the café after the war and welcomed veterans who returned to visit. Major Howard survived the war and lived until 1999. He attended commemorations at Pegasus Bridge regularly and maintained contact with survivors from D Company. He wrote a memoir describing the operation and emphasized the contributions of his men. He credited the glider pilots for navigation that made the assault possible. He credited the soldiers for executing under extreme stress. He acknowledged that luck played a role, but argued that preparation created the conditions for luck to matter. Staff Sergeant Walwork also survived and attended commemorations. He rarely discussed his role publicly, but acknowledged in interviews that landing 47 meters from the target was partly skill and partly fortune. The skill came from 9 months of intensive training. The fortune came from wind conditions that happened to be favorable and moonlight that happened to be sufficient for visual navigation. Different conditions might have resulted in a landing in the canal or village. The conditions were favorable. He exploited them. The glider pilots remained modest about their achievement. They argued that any pilot in the glider pilot regiment could have accomplished the same mission given equivalent training. This was generous but probably inaccurate. The navigation required exceptional skill and nerve. Flying a wooden glider at night toward enemy territory with no engine and no possibility of aborted approach required accepting risk that most pilots would avoid. The glider pilots accepted it because the mission required it. The strategic legacy of Operation Deadstick extends beyond the bridges themselves. The operation demonstrated that airborne forces could achieve precision objectives with minimal casualties if properly trained and employed. This influenced doctrine for subsequent operations. Market Garden in September 1944 and Varsity in March 1945 both employed glider assaults based partly on lessons from Pegasus Bridge. The results were mixed, but the concept remained valid. The operation also demonstrated the value of intelligence and reconnaissance. The aerial photographs that showed the bridges and landing zones were accurate. The intelligence about German troop dispositions was accurate. The information about removed demolition charges was accurate. This level of intelligence allowed Howard to plan precisely and brief his men thoroughly. Operations conducted without equivalent intelligence rarely achieve similar results. The psychological impact on German forces was significant. The sudden appearance of British troops deep behind German lines at the exact moment the invasion began created confusion about Allied capabilities. German commanders knew the Allies had airborne divisions but did not expect precision glider assaults at night. The success suggested Allied capabilities exceeded German estimates. This uncertainty affected German decision-making throughout June 6. The British public learned of the operation gradually. Initial reports mentioned airborne operations but provided few details. Security prevented publication of operational specifics until the Normandy campaign concluded. By August 1944, newspapers were publishing accounts of the glider assault with photographs of the bridges and interviews with Howard. The operation became one of the celebrated successes of D-Day, alongside Pointe du Hoc and Omaha Beach. The men of D Company received recognition but not celebrity. They were professional soldiers who had done their job. Most returned to regular duties after recovering from wounds. Some remained in airborne forces. Some transferred to other units. A few were killed in subsequent operations. They did not consider themselves heroes. They considered themselves soldiers who had been properly trained and fortunate enough to succeed. The Pegasus Bridge operation remains the textbook example of how to conduct a precision glider assault. Military academies study it. Special operations units study it. The factors that created success are well documented. Intensive training, precise navigation, speed of execution, fire discipline, individual initiative. These factors are replicable. The specific conditions that made the mission possible, favorable weather and removed demolition charges, are not replicable, but the principles apply to any operation requiring precision and speed. At 0:16 hours on June 6, 1944, 6 gliders carrying 181 men landed in Normandy. Within 10 minutes, they had captured 2 bridges intact. Within 13 hours, they had held them against counterattack until relieved. The bridges remained in British hands for the duration of the war. The operation succeeded because it was planned thoroughly, trained intensively, and executed precisely. The soldiers did their job. The bridges were captured. The invasion succeeded. That is Operation Deadstick.